You meet George Foreman?
On a blind date, and it was August 29, 1970. A guy friend of mine came by my house and he said, "Look at this guy, this boxer George Foreman's in town, and we want somebody to kind of go out with all of us, go out with him, and you don't have to do nothing." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll go." And the boyfriend I had he wasn't nobody.
Tonight, the world is stunned as an unimaginable twist shatters reality. Mary Joan Martelli, the longtime wife of boxing legend George Foreman, has been sentenced to life in prison for a crime she did not commit. In a baffling case of mistaken identity and bureaucratic error, the nation is left reeling as justice appears to have been thrown into chaos. As George Foreman himself pleads for truth and vindication, an intricate web of legal missteps, media frenzy, and human tragedy unfolds before our eyes. The saga began with a single, catastrophic error, a clerical mishap so profound that it would upend the lives of those involved. In the midst of a high-profile murder investigation, police records erroneously linked Mary Joan Martelli to a crime scene involving a man who shared an almost identical name with her illustrious husband. The mistake, buried in a labyrinth of administrative files and hastily cross-referenced databases, set off a chain of events that none could have foreseen. In the initial hours following the discovery of a body in a quiet Texas neighborhood, law enforcement officers rushed to apprehend the person they believed to be connected to the case. Instead of finding a dangerous criminal mastermind, investigators found a devoted wife, a woman known for her gentle smile and supportive nature, a woman who had dedicated her life to standing by the side of a sports icon. As the first reports hit the airwaves, the media pounced on the story with a ferocity that bordered on the surreal. Headlines screamed about the unthinkable: George Foreman's wife suspected of murder, and wrongful arrest shocks the nation. Television anchors and newspaper columnists alike could hardly believe the news. Every news outlet, from local stations to national networks, amplified the story, turning what should have been a routine error into a full-blown media circus. The air was thick with speculation and shock, as experts debated how such a grievous mistake could occur in a system that was supposed to uphold the law. In the days following her arrest, Mary Joan Martelli's quiet world was shattered by a relentless barrage of media inquiries and public scrutiny. Friends and neighbors described her as a kind and caring individual, someone who had never been associated with any form of violence or wrongdoing. Yet, despite the mounting evidence of her innocence, the wheels of justice continued to grind forward, seemingly indifferent to the truth. Behind the high walls of a court that was already saturated with public opinion, a trial was convened that would come to be known as one of the most perplexing legal ordeals in recent history. The trial, set against the backdrop of intense media scrutiny, moved at an alarming pace. The prosecution, under immense pressure to deliver a verdict that would satisfy an outraged public, leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence and testimony that, in hindsight, appeared glaringly flawed. Witnesses who had been hurriedly brought forward during the initial investigation now took the stand, their testimonies a patchwork of inconsistencies and hurried recollections. The defense, working tirelessly to peel back the layers of this judicial nightmare, presented phone records, travel itineraries, and surveillance footage that placed Mary Joan miles away from the scene of the alleged crime at the time it was committed. Throughout the proceedings, George Foreman's voice resonated above the din of controversy and speculation. In tearful interviews and impassioned statements delivered from the sidelines of the courtroom, he recounted the deep bond he shared with his wife, a bond forged over decades of shared struggles and triumphs. "This has been a nightmare," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "My wife is the kindest soul I know. To see her dragged through this hell over a mere paperwork error is a tragedy beyond words. They took my wife from me over a bureaucratic mistake, and I will not rest until justice is served." His words, laced with raw emotion, captured the hearts of millions who watched the proceedings with bated breath, wondering how such a miscarriage of justice could occur in a civilized society. As the trial unfolded, it became increasingly evident that the system was failing, not just Mary Joan, but every individual who believed in the sanctity of justice. Legal experts watching the trial noted that the speed with which the case was pushed to verdict was unprecedented. In their view, the process had been tainted by a rush to judgment Decision made under the intense glare of public opinion and media pressure. The prosecution's reliance on circumstantial evidence and a series of testimonies that had not withstood rigorous cross-examination left many legal scholars and former judges shaking their heads in disbelief. "This isn't just a mistake," one renowned legal commentator remarked during a live broadcast. "It's a failure of the entire system, a failure that has left an innocent woman condemned and has thrown into question the very integrity of our judicial process." In the midst of the legal turmoil, new evidence began to surface that would eventually challenge the foundation of the case. Investigators, under mounting public pressure, re-examined the original crime scene and the evidence that had been so hastily assembled. Forensic experts discovered that the fingerprints found at the scene did not match Mary Jones, nor did they correspond with any known associates of the Foreman family. Instead, they matched those of a known felon, a man with a long history of violent crimes and a record that painted a stark contrast to the character of the woman now languishing behind bars. This breakthrough sent ripples through the courtroom and ignited fresh hope that justice might yet prevail. However, by the time these revelations came to light, the machinery of the legal system had already delivered its crushing blow. Outside the courthouse, the streets were filled with impassioned demonstrators and outraged citizens demanding a retrial and the immediate release of Mary Joan Martelli. Social media platforms, where public sentiment was as volatile as it was vocal, became the battleground for heated debates. Hashtags emerged overnight, with thousands of users rallying behind the cause of justice, decrying what they saw as an egregious miscarriage of justice. Videos of impassioned speeches by community leaders and emotional pleas from members of the Foreman family circulated widely, each one echoing the same sentiment: that an innocent life had been irreparably damaged by an error that should never have been allowed to occur. Amid the clamor, George Foreman refused to be silenced. Determined to right the wrong that had been done, he embarked on a tireless campaign for exoneration. Hiring top legal experts and launching an independent investigation, he vowed to leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of truth. "They took my wife from me over a mere paperwork error," he repeated in a series of televised interviews, his voice steady despite the anguish behind his eyes. "I will not allow this travesty to stand. I demand accountability. Not just for my wife, but for every person whose life has been upended by this colossal mistake." His relentless pursuit of justice became a rallying cry for reform, drawing support from legal reform advocates, human rights organizations, and ordinary citizens alike. In the courtroom, tensions ran high as the defense made its final, desperate plea for a retrial. They argued that the evidence presented against Mary Joan was not only circumstantial, but also riddled with inconsistencies that pointed to a broader systemic failure. Detailed analyses of phone records and travel logs, painstakingly compiled by her legal team, painted a clear picture. Mary Joan had been miles away from the scene at the time of the murder. Moreover, surveillance footage from a nearby establishment corroborated her whereabouts, leaving little doubt as to her innocence. Yet despite the mounting evidence and the growing chorus of dissent from legal experts, the jury's verdict remained unchanged, a verdict that would forever mark this case as a dark chapter in the annals of judicial error. The sentence was passed with a gravity that seemed to echo the collective shock of the nation. Mary Joan Martelli was condemned to life in prison, a punishment that, for many, felt not only unjust but also emblematic of a system that had lost its way. In the days that followed, as appeals were filed and legal teams scrambled to piece together a path toward exoneration, the public's outrage only intensified. It was a case that transcended the boundaries of a mere legal dispute. It became a symbol of the fragility of justice in an era dominated by sensational headlines and rapid-fire judgments. As investigations continued, new leads emerged that cast even deeper doubt on the original case. Forensic re-examinations of the Icho crime scene revealed additional evidence that had been overlooked in the initial chaos, a discovery that would eventually pave the way for a long-overdue reopening of the case. Detailed analysis of the blood samples, the positioning of evidence, and even the timestamps on security footage all pointed to a narrative that was starkly different from the one initially presented. In this revised account, Mary Joan Martelli was not the perpetrator, but rather an unwitting victim of a series of unfortunate errors. The real culprit, it turned out, was a man whose violent past had long been documented in police records, a man who had slipped through the cracks of the system and had managed to evade detection until now. This new evidence provided a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak scenario. Legal teams on both sides of the aisle began to reconsider the merits of the case, and calls for a retrial grew louder by the day. Yet even as the wheels of justice slowly started to turn in favor of truth, the damage had already been done. The wrongful conviction of Mary Joan Martelli had not only upended her life, but had also cast a long shadow over the entire judicial process. It was a stark reminder that even in a society built on the ideals of fairness and justice, human error could lead to catastrophic consequences. Throughout this turbulent period, George Foreman remained a pillar of strength and determination. His public appearances, though infrequent, were marked by a palpable resolve to see his wife vindicated. In one of his most memorable interviews, he recounted the personal toll the ordeal had taken on both him and his family. "Every day is a battle," he said, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and steely determination. "I wake up each morning with the same burning question: how could such a mistake be allowed to happen? It is not just my wife's life that has been ruined by this error. It is the integrity of our entire justice system. I will fight until the very end to ensure that the truth comes to light." As weeks turned into months, the public's outcry evolved into a sustained movement for reform. Activists and legal experts organized rallies and public forums, demanding a thorough investigation into the series of errors that had led to the wrongful conviction. The movement was not merely about freeing one wronged individual. It was about ensuring that no other family would have to endure the heartbreak of watching a loved one condemned on the basis of a mistake. Petitions calling for accountability were signed by hundreds of thousands of citizens, and lawmakers were forced to take notice of a system that seemed increasingly out of step with the principles of justice and due process. Amid this growing clamor for reform, the legal system found itself at a crossroads. On one hand, there was undeniable evidence that a grave error had been made, a mistake that had irreversibly altered the lives of those involved. On the other hand, the momentum of the original trial, bolstered by a media machine that thrived on sensationalism, made it exceedingly difficult to reverse the tide of public opinion. The pressure was mounting on every level of the judicial hierarchy, from local law enforcement agencies to the highest courts in the land, to rectify a mistake that had become a national scandal. In a surprising turn of events, as more evidence came to light, a breakthrough emerged that would eventually force authorities to reopen the investigation. Detailed forensic tests and an independent review of the case files revealed that the fingerprints at the crime scene belonged to a man with a well-documented history of violent offenses, a man whose identity had been obscured by the initial rush to judgment. This revelation cast a long shadow over the prosecution's case and provided the defense with a powerful tool in their fight for justice. It was a turning point that reinvigorated the movement for Mary Joan's exoneration, and it marked the beginning of a long, arduous journey to set things right. Despite the overwhelming evidence pointing to her innocence, Mary Joan Martelli's ordeal had already left scars that would take a lifetime to heal. The wrongful imprisonment was not just a legal error. It was a personal tragedy of epic proportions. Friends, family members, and supporters described the experience as nothing short of a living nightmare. A dark chapter in a story that had once been defined by love, loyalty, and unwavering support. For a beloved sports icon, the psychological toll on Mary Joan was immense, as she grappled with the reality of spending her days confined within the cold, unyielding walls of a prison cell, all while the world outside debated her fate with little regard for the human cost of such a mistake. George Foreman's fight for justice became more than just a personal crusade. It evolved into a symbol of resistance against a system that, at times, seemed to value expediency over truth. His every public statement, every interview, and every heartfelt plea resonated with a growing number of individuals who believed that the truth had been obscured by a series of bureaucratic missteps and sensational headlines. In one particularly emotional address at a press conference, he recounted how the ordeal had not only disrupted his family's life, but had also forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of fame, justice, and the power of the media. "We live in a world where a single error can destroy lives," he declared, his voice echoing across the room. I refuse to accept that my wife's fate should be determined by a system that is so quick to judge and so slow to correct its mistakes. As the investigation gained momentum, the pressure on the authorities to correct their mistake intensified. Legal experts called for a comprehensive review of the processes that had allowed such an error to occur, and lawmakers began discussing reforms aimed at preventing future miscarriages of justice. The case of Mary Joan Martelli became a rallying cry for transparency and accountability, a stark reminder that even the most hallowed institutions could falter under the weight of human error. Throughout it all, the media continued to cover every development with unrelenting intensity, ensuring that the story remained in the public eye and that the call for justice grew ever louder. In the midst of this tumultuous period, the real culprit behind the murder finally came under intense scrutiny. The man whose fingerprints had been found at the crime scene, a man with a history of violent behavior and a long list of prior offenses, was swiftly apprehended following the EC breakthrough in the forensic analysis. His arrest was hailed by many as a long overdue step toward rectifying the grievous error that had led to Mary Joan's conviction. Yet even as the man was taken into custody, questions remained. How could such a glaring mistake have been made in the first place? And what did it say about the state of modern law enforcement and the mechanisms of justice in a society that prided itself on fairness and accuracy? The answers, it seemed, lay in a confluence of factors, a combination of outdated record-keeping practices, a media landscape hungry for sensational stories, and a judicial system that, under pressure, sometimes prioritized expediency over meticulous fact-checking. As investigators and legal analysts delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a series of administrative oversights and miscommunications that had culminated in the wrongful conviction of an innocent woman. Each new revelation added another layer to an already complex and deeply troubling narrative. A narrative that exposed vulnerabilities in the very institutions that were meant to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. Even as the wheels of justice began to turn toward a possible retrial, the personal cost of the ordeal was impossible to measure. Mary Joan Martelli, once a pillar of support for her family and a quiet presence in the community, was now a symbol of a system gone awry. Her life, once defined by love, loyalty, and quiet dignity, had been reduced to a series of courtroom battles, public outcries, and the constant struggle for vindication. The emotional scars, the loss of time and freedom, and the relentless media scrutiny had left a mark that would be difficult, if not impossible, to erase. George Foreman's determination to restore his wife's honor and reclaim the truth became a beacon of hope in a dark and turbulent time. His campaign for justice was marked by tireless efforts to gather new evidence, to challenge the flawed processes that had led to the tragedy, and to speak out against a system that had all but given up on its duty to protect the innocent. In every interview, every public appearance, and every heartfelt message directed at the nation, he made it abundantly clear that his fight was not just for Mary Joan, but for every person who had ever been wronged by a rushed and careless system. "We must demand accountability," he declared in one memorable address, his voice unwavering despite the weight of his personal loss. "Our society cannot afford to let mistakes like this go uncorrected. For the sake of our future, we must ensure that no other family endures the agony that mine has suffered." As the legal battles raged on and the process of re-examining evidence continued, the case of Mary Joan Martelli evolved into a broader discussion about the need for systemic reform. Lawmakers, activists, and ordinary citizens began to question whether the current framework for handling criminal investigations was sufficient to protect the rights of individuals. The story sparked heated debates in legislative halls and community forums alike, with many calling for stricter oversight, better training for law enforcement personnel, and the implementation of modernized record-keeping systems that could prevent similar errors in the future. In the midst of all this, the human element of the story, the profound impact on a family torn apart by a mistake, remained at the forefront of public consciousness. Friends and relatives of Mary Joan spoke of a woman who had always embodied compassion, resilience, and unwavering strength. They recalled the countless times she had been the calm in the storm, the voice of reason in moments of crisis, and the steadfast presence that held the family together. Now forced to endure the indignity of a wrongful conviction, she became a tragic figure, a victim of circumstance, a casualty of a system that had failed to deliver on its promise of justice. George Foreman, though overwhelmed by grief and anger, refused to allow despair to dictate the course of his actions. His determination to clear his wife's name was matched only by his commitment to ensuring that the errors that led to this tragedy would never be repeated. In quiet moments away from the relentless scrutiny of the media, he spoke of his hope for a future where justice was not compromised by haste and where every individual, regardless of their background, could be assured of a fair and thorough examination of the facts. "This is not just about one mistake," he confided during a rare private conversation. "It's about safeguarding the principles that we hold dear as a society. I owe it to my wife, to our family, and to every innocent person out there who might one day find themselves caught in a similar nightmare." Over time, the relentless efforts of George Foreman and his dedicated legal team began to bear fruit. A series of appeals, bolstered by the new forensic evidence and the overwhelming public outcry, forced the authorities to reopen the investigation in a formal capacity. The reopening of the case was met with a mixture of cautious optimism and lingering skepticism, a recognition that while the wheels of justice might finally be turning, the scars of the past would not be so easily healed. As the new investigation gathered pace, every piece of evidence was scrutinized, every testimony re-examined, and every link in the chain of events traced back to its origin. The hope was that in the light of these fresh insights, the truth would emerge from the darkness that had so long shrouded this case. Throughout this prolonged struggle, George Foreman remained an indefatigable advocate for reform. His every public appearance was marked by a calm, yet unyielding determination to see the truth prevail. Whether addressing small community gatherings or speaking at major press conferences, he made sure that his message was clear. The wrong that had been done to his wife was not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a larger malaise within the justice system. "We cannot allow a single administrative error to ruin lives," he proclaimed, during one particularly moving address. "Our society must evolve. Our institutions must learn from their mistakes, and above all, we must never lose sight of the human cost of these failures." In the final stages of the renewed investigation, as prosecutors painstakingly reconstructed the sequence of events leading up to the crime, a clearer picture began to emerge, one that exonerated Mary Joan Martelli and pinpointed the true culprit behind the murder. The evidence, once obscured by a conflation of similar names and bureaucratic mismanagement, now stood as a testament to the importance of thorough, unbiased inquiry. Witnesses who had once testified under duress now recounted their observations with new clarity, and forensic reports were revisited with the benefit of modern technology and renewed scrutiny. The narrative that had once seemed so ironclad was now crumbling under the weight of incontrovertible facts. When the final verdict was eventually overturned, and Mary Joan was released from prison, the relief that swept through the nation was tempered by the bitter knowledge of the years lost and the trauma endured. The journey to exoneration had been long and painful, a testament to both the resilience of the human spirit and the profound flaws in a system that had allowed such an injustice to occur. Yet amid the sorrow and regret, there was a renewed sense of hope, a determination to build a future in which such errors would never be repeated, and in which the scales of justice would be balanced with care and precision. In the aftermath of her release, Mary Joan Martelli faced the daunting task of rebuilding a life that had been irreparably altered by the events that had unfolded. The road to recovery was not an easy one. It was paved with memories of endless courtroom battles, public humiliation, and the crushing weight of societal judgment. Yet even as she began to piece together the fragments of a life once defined by quiet dignity and familial love, she found solace in the outpouring of support from communities across the nation. Messages of encouragement, calls for systemic reform, and heartfelt declarations of solidarity flowed in from every corner of the country. For many, her ordeal had become emblematic of a broader struggle for justice, a struggle that demanded accountability, transparency, and an unwavering commitment to truth. George Foreman, ever the stalwart defender of his wife's honor, continued to channel his grief and anger into a relentless pursuit of change. His tireless efforts to raise awareness about the flaws in the judicial system resonated with a wide audience, sparking debates in legislative chambers and inspiring grassroots movements dedicated to reform. In interviews that ranged from quiet moments of reflection to fiery public addresses, he painted a picture of a society at a crossroads, a society that had to confront the reality that even those institutions meant to safeguard the innocent could falter under the pressures of a world driven by speed and spectacle. "Every day, I see the faces of those who have suffered due to these mistakes," he remarked during one interview, his tone both sorrowful and resolute. "I see the pain of a mother separated from her child, the anguish of a brother unjustly incarcerated, and I know that we must act now to ensure that no one else is ever forced to endure such heartbreak." As the case drew to a close and the echoes of the courtroom battles began to fade, the legacy of this tumultuous chapter in modern legal history left an indelible mark on society. The story of Mary Joan Martelli and the labyrinthine path that led to her wrongful conviction became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of human error, the perils of unchecked media sensationalism, and the urgent need for comprehensive reform in the administration of justice. For many, it served as a wake-up call, a call to arms demanding that every facet of the legal process be scrutinized and improved to prevent future tragedies of this magnitude. In the months that followed, legislative committees convened to examine the series of errors that had precipitated the scandal. Lawmakers debated vigorously over proposed measures to modernize record-keeping systems, enhance forensic analysis protocols, and implement stricter oversight of judicial proceedings. The discussions were marked by a palpable sense of urgency, a collective acknowledgement that the integrity of the justice system was at stake. Through a combination of public pressure and sincere calls for accountability, reforms began to take shape, offering a glimmer of hope that the deep-seated issues exposed by this case would not be allowed to fester unchecked. For George Foreman, the journey was far from over. Even as the legal system slowly began to correct its mistakes, he continued to champion the cause of justice with the fervor of a man who had lost so much yet refused to be defeated. His every word, every public appearance, was imbued with the unwavering belief that truth, no matter how long it was hidden, would eventually come to light. "My wife's suffering will not be in vain," he declared during one of his many heartfelt addresses. "We must learn from this tragedy and work together to build a system that truly reflects the values of fairness, compassion, and accountability." His call resonated with people from all walks of life, uniting communities in a shared commitment to ensuring that no other family would ever have to endure a similar fate. As the nation began to heal from the shock of the events that had unfolded, the story of Mary Joan Martelli gradually transformed from one of scandal and outrage to a rallying cry for justice and reform. The wrongful conviction, once a source of bitter controversy and relentless debate, became a symbol of the need for vigilance in the face of human error, a reminder that even the most revered institutions were not immune to failure. In its wake, a new era of legal scrutiny and accountability was born, one that promised to honor the memory of those who had been wronged, and to protect the rights of the innocent for generations to come. In reflecting on the tumultuous events of the past months, many in the community found themselves pondering the fragility of truth in a world dominated by rapid-fire news cycles and sensational headlines. The case of Mary Joan Martelli underscored the importance of careful, deliberate investigation, a principle that had been sacrificed on the altar of expediency and public pressure. It was a lesson, painful yet profound, that resonated deeply with everyone who had witnessed the unraveling of a life through no fault of its own. Even as the dust settled and the echoes of outrage began to fade, the impact of the case remained etched in the collective memory of a nation that had been forced to confront its own vulnerabilities. The story of a devoted wife wrongfully condemned, the relentless fight of a husband determined to reclaim honor, and the systemic failures that allowed such a tragedy to unfold served as a stark reminder of the responsibilities borne by those entrusted with upholding the law. It was a narrative woven from threads of sorrow, hope, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of redemption, a narrative that would continue to inspire calls for change long after the courtroom battles had ended. In the end, the legacy of this scandal was not merely one of error and injustice, but also of resilience and the enduring human spirit. Mary Joan Martelli's journey from the depths of despair to the long-awaited vindication of her innocence became a testament to the power of perseverance and the unyielding quest for truth. George Foreman's impassioned campaign for justice, marked by every tear, every impassioned word, and every determined step forward, left an indelible imprint on the hearts of all who believed that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, hope could triumph over despair. Today, as the case is finally laid to rest in the annals of legal history, the story of Mary Joan Martelli and the extraordinary battle for her freedom serves as both a warning and an inspiration. It is a reminder that the pursuit of truth is a relentless endeavor, one that demands vigilance, integrity, and above all, commitment to fairness. The echoes of this scandal will continue to reverberate through the corridors of justice, urging every institution, every individual, to strive for a system where mistakes are acknowledged, accountability is paramount, and every life is treated with the dignity it deserves. In the wake of her exoneration, Mary Joan has begun the slow process of reclaiming the life that was so brutally interrupted. With the support of a community that rallied behind her in her darkest hours, she is taking tentative steps toward healing, steps that are both a personal triumph and a beacon of hope for others who have been ensnared in similar injustices. Her story, though marred by pain and loss, now stands as a powerful symbol of the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of a seemingly insurmountable injustice, the quest for truth remains an unbreakable force. George Foreman, forever changed by the ordeal, continues his crusade for a better, more just society. Every public statement he makes, every appearance he undertakes, is imbued with the determination to ensure that no other family endures the heartbreak of a wrongful conviction. His voice, once filled with despair at the cruelty of a system gone awry, now resonates with a profound hope for a future where accountability and compassion prevail over haste and error. This long, tumultuous journey, a journey marked by heartbreak, public outcry, and the slow but steady march toward redemption, has ultimately transformed into a call for lasting change. It is a call that transcends individual grievances and speaks to a universal desire for a justice system that is as precise as it is humane. The scandal that rocked the world is now being used as a catalyst for reform, a living lesson in the consequences of error, and a reminder of the unyielding need to protect the innocent at all costs. Looking forward, there is a palpable sense of cautious optimism among those who have followed every twist and turn of this extraordinary case. The reopening of the investigation, the subsequent arrest of the true culprit, and the eventual exoneration of an innocent woman have all served to galvanize a movement for reform, a movement that will, it is hoped, ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. As the legal system takes its first tentative steps toward healing, there is a collective commitment to preserving the dignity and rights of every individual, regardless of the pressures of the moment. In the final analysis, the story of Mary Joan Martelli and George Foreman is one of profound tragedy, intermingled with the enduring hope for a better tomorrow. It is a story that reminds us all that even when the machinery of justice falters, the truth remains an immutable force, one that, given time and unwavering determination, will ultimately shine through the darkness. The journey is far from over, and the lessons learned from this ordeal will undoubtedly shape the future of legal reform for years to come. As we look back on these turbulent events, we are left with a deep and abiding understanding of the complexities of human error and the consequences of a system that sometimes prioritizes speed over accuracy. The scandal, now etched into the fabric of our collective memory, serves as a powerful reminder that justice must be pursued with both rigor and compassion, and that the rights of the individual should never be sacrificed at the altar of expediency. It is a lesson that will resonate in courtrooms, legislative halls, and living rooms across the nation, a lesson born from the pain of a wrongful conviction and the hope for a future where such errors are no more. The case of Mary Joan Martelli, in all its shocking twists and heart-wrenching turns, has left an indelible mark on the national consciousness. It is a story of human fallibility, of the dangers inherent in rushed decisions, and of the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of overwhelming odds. As the echoes of this saga continue to reverberate, one thing remains clear. The quest for justice is an unending journey, and every misstep along the way is a call to strive for a system that is as just as it is humane. Even now, as new chapters are written in the ongoing saga of reform and accountability, the Memory of what transpired will serve as a constant reminder of the need for vigilance and integrity. The wrongful conviction of an innocent woman has ignited a fire for change. A fire that, despite the ashes of lost time and shattered lives, burns with the promise of a brighter, fairer future. And as George Foreman and his supporters continue their fight for justice, the story of Mary Joan Martelli stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring belief that truth, no matter how obscured, will ultimately prevail. In the end, what began as a series of inexplicable errors has become a powerful narrative, a narrative that challenges us to look beyond the headlines and to question the very mechanisms by which we deliver justice. It is a story that compels us to confront our own assumptions, to demand accountability from those in positions of power, and to never accept an answer that comes too quickly without thorough examination. The legacy of this case, painful as it may be, is one that offers a promise of redemption, a promise that, even in our darkest moments, the light of truth will find a way to break through. And so, as the dust finally begins to settle on this long and convoluted journey, we are left to reflect on the lessons learned and the road ahead. The transformation of a flawed system into one that values precision, empathy, and accountability is a process that will require time, commitment, and an unwavering dedication to the truth. Yet in the wake of such a monumental mistake, there is a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to ensure that the tragedy of Mary Joan Martelli is not repeated, and that every individual is afforded the justice they deserve. While the scars of this ordeal will never fully fade, there is hope in the knowledge that the struggle for a fair and just society continues. The voices of those who have suffered, the tears of the innocent, and the impassioned pleas of a community united in its quest for truth will serve as a constant reminder that the price of error is far too high and that every effort must be made to safeguard the dignity of every human life. In this extraordinary tale of mistaken identity, relentless injustice, and the unwavering fight for redemption, the journey is a reminder that the pursuit of justice is never a straightforward path. It is a winding road marked by setbacks and unexpected triumphs, a journey that demands perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. And as George Foreman, with his steadfast resolve, continues to lead the charge for reform, his words echo in the hearts of all who believe that the truth must always prevail. This is more than just a story of one wrongful conviction. It is a call to action for every citizen, every leader, and every institution that dares to claim the mantle of justice. The legacy of this scandal will serve as a beacon for future generations, urging them to build a society where mistakes are acknowledged, lessons are learned, and every life is valued beyond measure. And though the road ahead may be long and fraught with challenges, the fight for a system that truly embodies fairness and compassion is one that will continue until every wrong is righted. In the final analysis, the saga of Mary Joan Martelli and the unyielding quest for her exoneration stands as a monument to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of truth. It is a narrative woven from the threads of sorrow and hope, despair and determination, a narrative that, in its most profound moments, reaffirms our collective belief in the possibility of redemption. And as we move forward, carrying the lessons of this tragic chapter in our hearts, we can only hope that the changes it inspires will pave the way for a future where justice is not merely an ideal, but a reality for all.